Imagine living your entire life without ever asking a question. Not because you aren't intelligent, not because you can't learn, but because the thought never occurs to you. You wake up, you search for food, you avoid danger, you sleep. And then you repeat the process tomorrow. For millions of years, that was life on Earth. Animals survived, animals adapted, animals evolved, but none of them built civilizations. None of them painted their thoughts on cave walls. None of them stared into the night sky and wondered what existed beyond it. Then something extraordinary happened. Somewhere in the distant past, a member of our species looked at the world and experienced something no creature had ever experienced before. Not just awareness of the environment, awareness of themselves. A realization so powerful that it would eventually create religion, philosophy, art, science, love stories, burial rituals, and entire civilizations. A realization that still shapes every moment of your life today. Because at some point, humans stopped merely existing and started knowing that they existed. But how did that happen? What changed inside the human mind? And why might the greatest gift evolution ever produced also be the source of humanity's greatest struggles? The answer begins long before cities, long before farming, long before written history. It begins in a world where humans were just another animal trying to survive. If you could travel back 300,000 years, you probably wouldn't recognize the world. There were no roads, no buildings, no governments, no schools, no books. Human beings lived in small groups, surrounded by predators, harsh weather, and constant uncertainty. Survival was difficult. Every day demanded attention. Food had to be found. Shelter had to be secured. Danger could appear without warning. Yet despite these challenges, something unusual was happening inside the human brain. The brain itself had been growing for millions of years. Our ancestors weren't becoming physically stronger than every other animal. In many ways, they were weaker. A human cannot outrun a horse, cannot outfight a bear, cannot outsee an eagle, cannot outswim a dolphin. Yet humans eventually became the dominant species on Earth. Why? The common answer is intelligence. But intelligence alone isn't enough. Crows solve problems, octopuses solve puzzles, chimpanzees use tools. Many animals display remarkable intelligence, yet none of them transformed the planet. None of them created mathematics. None of them built spacecraft. None of them developed philosophies about existence. The difference wasn't simply intelligence. The difference was a new kind of awareness. Humans began to think about themselves. Think about that for a moment. You're not merely having thoughts right now. You're aware that you're having thoughts. You can examine your own mind. You can question your beliefs. You can imagine different versions of yourself. You can replay the past and simulate the future. This ability feels so normal that we rarely stop to appreciate how strange it really is. Every second of every day, there is a version of you observing the experience of being you. That observer may be the most important invention evolution ever created, but where did it come from? And why did it appear? The mystery becomes even stranger when we consider the consequences, because the moment humans became self-aware, they gained something no other species had ever possessed, a relationship with their own existence, and that changed everything. Scientists cannot point to a specific day when self-awareness emerged. There was no sudden switch, no dramatic moment when one human woke up different from everyone else. Instead, the transformation likely unfolded over thousands of generations. Small changes accumulated, brains became larger, social groups became more complex, communication improved, memory expanded. Eventually, the human mind reached a point where it could do something revolutionary. It could create a mental model of itself. In simple terms, the brain gained the ability to step outside its immediate experience and observe itself. Psychologists often refer to this as metacognition, thinking about thinking. At first glance, that may not sound impressive, but nearly every aspect of modern human life depends on it. Imagine trying to improve a skill without being able to reflect on your mistakes. Imagine trying to plan for the future without imagining future versions of yourself. Imagine trying to understand another person's feelings without understanding your own. Self-awareness made all of these things possible. It allowed humans to become students of their own minds. And once that happened, learning accelerated. Knowledge could be accumulated across generations. Experiences could be analyzed, strategies could be refined, mistakes could become lessons. For the first time, a species wasn't just adapting to the world, it was consciously studying its own adaptation. But perhaps the most important consequence involves time itself. Most animals live primarily in the present moment. Humans gain the ability to mentally travel through time. They could revisit yesterday, they could imagine tomorrow. They could build stories connecting past, present, and future. This changed survival forever. A hunter could imagine a future hunt before it happened. A parent could prepare for future dangers. A group could plan months ahead instead of hours ahead. The future became something that could be explored before it arrived, and that ability would eventually reshape the entire planet. Yet hidden inside this gift was a problem that no previous species had ever faced, a problem that continues to affect every human alive today. For most animals, danger exists in the present. A predator appears, fear appears, the predator leaves, fear fades, the system is simple, the threat is real, immediate, and visible. But self-awareness changed the rules. Once humans could imagine the future, they no longer needed a real threat to feel fear. A human could sit safely beside a fire and still experience terror, not because something dangerous was happening, but because something dangerous might happen. For the first time in Earth's history, a creature could suffer from possibilities. Imagine one of our ancient ancestors watching an elder die. For generations, death had always been part of life. Animals died. Humans died. The cycle continued. But now something was different. The observer inside the human mind began making connections. If they died, then I can die too. That realization may have been one of the most shocking discoveries any species has ever made, because death is not merely an event. For a self-aware mind, death becomes an idea, and ideas can live forever. Long before humans developed science, they understood mortality. Long before written language, they understood loss. Evidence of this realization appears throughout the archaeological record. Some of the earliest known human burials date back tens of thousands of years. Bodies were carefully placed in graves, sometimes surrounded by tools, sometimes accompanied by objects that seemed important, sometimes covered with pigments or flowers. Why? No one knows for certain. But many researchers believe these burials reveal something profound. Humans were no longer treating death as the disappearance of a body. They were treating it as something meaningful, a transition, a mystery, a question. And questions are the natural product of self-awareness, because once you know that you exist, another question inevitably follows. What happens when I stop existing? That question still haunts humanity today. Different cultures have produced different answers. Religions, philosophies, spiritual traditions, scientific investigations, yet all of them may trace their origins back to the moment humans became aware of their own mortality. Ironically, the ability that helped us dominate the world also introduced a kind of suffering unknown to every species before us. Anxiety, regret, existential fear, worry, dread. These emotions are deeply connected to self-awareness. You cannot regret a different past unless you can imagine it. You cannot fear a future unless you can picture it. You cannot question your purpose unless you first understand that you exist. The observer inside your mind creates possibilities, but it also creates burdens, and yet evolution never removed this burden because the rewards were even greater. Self-awareness did far more than make humans conscious of death. It transformed imagination itself. Most animals react to reality. Humans react to reality and simulations of reality. Right now, you can close your eyes and imagine yourself standing on a beach. You can picture the waves, hear the water, feel the sand. None of it is real. Yet your brain can generate the experience anyway. This ability may be one of the greatest advantages our species ever developed, because imagination allows humans to practice without acting. A hunter can imagine a strategy before a hunt. A builder can imagine a structure before construction begins. A leader can imagine the consequences of a decision before making it. In a sense, self-awareness gave humanity a virtual reality simulator inside the skull. Instead of learning only through direct experience, humans could learn through mental experience. And that changed everything. Suddenly, innovation became possible. Ideas could be tested internally before being tested externally. Mistakes could be prevented before they occurred. Future scenarios could be explored without risk. This ability accelerated cultural evolution at an astonishing rate. Knowledge no longer depended entirely on trial and error. Knowledge could be imagined, refined, shared, improved. The human brain became a machine for creating realities that did not yet exist. Every invention began as an imagined possibility. Every civilization began as an imagined future. Every work of art began as an imagined image. Every scientific breakthrough began as an imagined question. In this sense, self-awareness may be the foundation of all human creativity. But there is another consequence that is often overlooked. Self-awareness created identity, not just survival, not just consciousness. Identity, the story of me. Humans don't simply experience life. Humans construct narratives about life. You remember your past. You imagine your future. You connect the two into a continuous story. And that story becomes your sense of self. But here's where things become strange. That story is constantly changing. The person you were at age 10 is different from the person you are today. Your beliefs change. Your goals change. Your personality evolves. Yet somehow you still feel like the same person. Why? Because self-awareness acts like a narrator. It stitches together countless experiences into a single identity. Without that narrator, life would feel like disconnected moments. With it, life becomes a story, and stories give meaning to existence. but they also create a new mystery. If the self is a story, who is telling it? If self-awareness were only about survival, humans would have stopped there. A brain that could predict danger, plan ahead, and learn from mistakes would already have been one of nature's greatest achievements, but self-awareness did something unexpected. It transformed survival into something larger. It transformed life into an experience. Think about the moments that matter most to you, your happiest memory, your greatest regret, a conversation you still remember years later, a place you miss, a person you lost. These moments matter because you are aware of them. A memory is more than information. It's a piece of your identity. When you remember your childhood, you aren't simply recalling facts. You're revisiting a version of yourself that no longer exists. In a strange way, every human lives alongside countless former versions of themselves. The child you once were, the teenager you became, the person you were 5 years ago, all gone, yet somehow still present. No other known species appears to experience life this way. Humans carry entire museums inside their minds. We revisit old moments, replay old conversations, imagine different outcomes, wonder what might have happened. Sometimes we spend more time living inside memories and possibilities than inside the present moment itself. This ability can be beautiful. It allows us to learn, to grow, to reflect, to appreciate, but it can also be painful because self-awareness makes comparison possible. You compare yourself to others. You compare your present self to your past self. You compare reality to your expectations. You compare what happened to what could have happened. Much of human happiness and suffering emerges from these comparisons. An animal may experience pain, but humans experience pain about pain. Humans analyze it, question it, attach meaning to it, carry it into the future. The observer inside the mind never fully stops working, and yet despite all its burdens, very few people would choose to live without it. Because self-awareness gives us access to something extraordinary, the ability to understand ourselves, the ability to understand each other, the ability to find meaning in experiences that would otherwise be random. And perhaps that is why humans have spent thousands of years telling stories, help us make sense of existence, they help us understand who we are. They help us answer questions that survival alone cannot answer. Questions like, why am I here? What kind of person do I want to become? What does a good life look like? These questions are not accidents. They are the natural consequences of self-awareness. The moment humans became aware of themselves, they also became seekers of meaning, and that search continues today. When people think about the most important moments in human history, they often think of inventions, fire, agriculture, the wheel, writing, electricity, the internet. All of these transformed civilization, but none of them would have been possible without a far older breakthrough, the emergence of a self-aware mind. Before humans could build tools, they had to imagine them. Before humans could create societies, they had to understand themselves as individuals within a group. Before humans could ask how the universe works, they first had to realize that they were separate observers within that universe. Self-awareness is the invisible foundation beneath everything humans have ever created. Science exists because humans question. Philosophy exists because humans reflect. Art exists because humans express inner experiences. Religion exists because humans seek meaning beyond survival. Even love is connected to self-awareness, because love requires understanding not only another person's emotions, but also your own. In many ways, nearly everything we consider uniquely human traces back to the same source: the ability to observe ourselves, and yet the story is still unfolding. Human self-awareness may not be finished evolving. The minds reading these words today are vastly different from those of our ancient ancestors. We live in worlds filled with information, technology, and constant stimulation. We can communicate across continents instantly. We can record our thoughts permanently. We can study the universe itself, but despite all our progress, the deepest questions remain unchanged. Who am I? Why am I here? What is consciousness? What gives life meaning? Thousands of years of civilization have not eliminated these mysteries. If anything, they have made them even more fascinating. Because the more humans learn about the mind, the stranger the mind appears. We have mapped galaxies, split atoms, decoded DNA, yet the experience of being conscious remains one of the greatest mysteries ever encountered, and perhaps that mystery is not a flaw. Perhaps it is the point. Nobody knows exactly when humans became self-aware. There is no date, no monument, no historical record, no witness left behind. The most important transformation in human history happened silently. Somewhere, long ago, an ancestor looked at the world and experienced something new. Not just sight, not just sound, not just sensation, but awareness of awareness itself, a mind recognizing its own existence. That moment changed everything. It gave humanity the ability to dream, to imagine, to create, to question, to fear, to hope, to search for meaning. Every civilization, Every story, every scientific discovery, every philosophy, every piece of art, every question ever asked by a human being began with that single transformation. And the strangest part is this: the event that changed humanity forever is still happening right now, inside your mind. Because every time you pause and wonder who you are, every time you reflect on your life, every time you question your future, you are participating in the same phenomenon that first emerged thousands of generations ago. The day humans became self-aware never truly ended. It continues in every conscious thought, every memory, every dream, and every question you ask yourself when the world grows quiet, including the oldest question of all: what does it mean to be human?